That last evening spent with my stepson remains etched in my memory, a moment I shall carry with me always. Truth be told, it lingers in my mind, for it was an experience brimming with exhilaration. It began on a Monday evening, the kind that holds a promise of change in the air. The silence enveloped the house, a stillness that felt almost palpable. My husband, John, departed early for his business trip, and in his absence, an unsettling silence enveloped the house, creeping into every shadowed corner. As I drifted through the corridors, a restless spirit, I sought to dispel an unsettling feeling that clung to me like a shadow, elusive and unnameable. Perhaps it was the profound silence that enveloped the house, or maybe it was the lingering presence of John's son, Jake, whose soft footsteps echoed like whispers across the floorboards above. After completing his college journey, Jake had returned to our home a few months prior. He had always exuded a certain politeness and kindness, a young man whose demeanor radiated a confidence that was impossible to overlook. In the weeks that had slipped by, I discovered myself captivated by the subtleties of his being. The gentle sweep of his hand through his hair as he pondered, the effortless laughter that danced from his lips at my jests, and the undeniable strength that resonated in his voice as he shared his visions for what lay ahead. It was a truth I found difficult to confront within the depths of my own mind. Yet, those seemingly insignificant details lingered in my mind far longer than they ought to have. That evening, I retired to my chamber sooner than my customary hour, yearning to elude the tumult of my restless musings. The gentle illumination of the bedside lamp cast a warm, golden light across the room, while the subtle drone of the air conditioner enveloped the atmosphere in a soothing embrace. As I nestled beneath the covers, the pages of my book blurred into a haze, my thoughts wandering restlessly to John, absent for what felt like an eternity, and to Jake, lingering just a few doors down the hall, an ever-present shadow in my mind. Unbeknownst to me, the moment of slumber had claimed me, but I was jolted awake, the creaking of the door slicing through the fog of my dreams. Initially, I questioned my own perception, wondering if it was merely a figment of my imagination. Yet, as I blinked, the reality crystallized before me. There stood Jake in the doorway, his form outlined by the soft glow of the hallway light. His hand lingered on the doorknob, his expression a veil of mystery. "Jake," I murmured, my voice thick with the remnants of slumber. I propped myself up, the fabric of the sheets whispering as I moved. "What troubles you?" Apologize," he stammered, retreating a half step. "I had no intention of disturbing your slumber." A fleeting sound caught my attention, a whisper of uncertainty in the stillness. I rubbed my eyes, struggling to grasp the gravity of the moment unfolding before me. "Is all well with you?" He paused, his eyes darting between me and the ground beneath us. "Indeed, it is quite satisfactory. Perhaps I simply crave the embrace of fresh air." It struck me then that he was not clad in the customary attire of slumber. Instead, he donned a relaxed t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair tousled as though he had been reclining, yet sleep had eluded him. His stance revealed a vulnerability that took me by surprise. "Come in," I found myself saying before I could rein in my impulse, gesturing to the edge of the bed with a gentle pat. "You need not remain in that spot any longer." For a fleeting moment, he remained still, as though contemplating the choices that lay before him. He crossed the threshold, the door whispering shut in his wake. The room seemed to shrink around her, the atmosphere thickening with an unspoken weight. He lingered at the edge of the bed, hands buried deep in his pockets, reluctant to take the plunge into the comfort of the mattress. "Shall we delve into the matter at hand?" I inquired, striving to maintain a playful lilt in my voice, even as my heart began to race with an urgency I could not ignore. He let out a soft sigh, settling into his seat, yet his eyes remained anchored to the intricate patterns of the carpet beneath him. It seems that a multitude of thoughts have been swirling in my mind of late. As I leaned forward just a touch, my curiosity piqued. He released a gentle chuckle, yet it held no trace of mirth. "Life, it seems, is a tapestry woven with threads of complexity." Though his words danced in ambiguity, the fervor that lay beneath them was undeniably genuine. I longed to extend a soothing hand upon his shoulder, yet uncertainty held me back. Instead, I inquired, "Have you spoken to your father about it?" Jake shook his head. "It's not really his thing. You know how he is. Keep your head down, work hard, and figure it out." I nodded, understanding what he meant. John was a good man, but emotional conversations weren't his strength. "Well, I'm here if you ever want to talk," I said softly, offering him a small smile. "You don't have to carry everything on your own." He looked up then, his eyes meeting mine. There was something in his expression that made my breath catch, something raw and unguarded. "Thanks," he said quietly. "That means a lot." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room was so quiet, I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. His gaze lingered on mine, and I felt a warmth rise to my cheeks. I quickly looked away, pretending to adjust the blanket. "You should try to get some sleep," I said, my voice a little too bright. "Whatever's on your mind will seem less overwhelming in the morning." "Yeah," he said, though he didn't move. "You're probably right," but he didn't leave, and I didn't push him to. The silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, but charged in a way I couldn't quite explain. My heart was beating faster than it should have been, and I found myself hyper-aware of every detail. The way his hand rested on the edge of the bed, the faint scent of his cologne, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. When he finally stood, it felt like a relief and a disappointment all at once. "Good night," he said, his voice soft. "Good night," I replied, watching as he walked to the door. But before he stepped out, he hesitated, glancing back over his shoulder. His eyes met mine again, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like there was something unspoken between us, something neither of us dared to acknowledge. Then he was gone, and I was left alone in the dimly lit room, my thoughts swirling in a way that made sleep impossible. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, the echo of his presence lingering in the air. Something had shifted tonight. I didn't know what, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. And no, I was right, because this was only the beginning of something that would happen more often and eventually spiral out of control. The next day, I couldn't shake the lingering tension from the night before. I'd replayed Jake's expression in my mind more times than I cared to admit. The vulnerability in his eyes, the hesitation in his voice. It wasn't just concern I'd felt for him in that moment. It was something deeper, something I didn't want to admit even to myself. The morning passed in a blur of half-hearted tasks. I busied myself with cleaning the kitchen, folding laundry, and anything to keep my mind occupied. Jake was in and out of the house, doing whatever errands or projects he had lined up for today, but every time I caught sight of him, my stomach tightened. He was just there, moving with a quiet confidence that seemed so effortless. Around noon, I was sitting at the dining table with a mug of tea when Jake came into the room. He grabbed a glass of water and leaned against the counter, his phone in one hand as he scrolled idly. "Did you sleep okay?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Yeah, I guess," he said, glancing up at me. "Better than I thought I would." "Good," I replied, nodding. The conversation felt stilted, almost awkward. I wanted to ask him about last night, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I sipped my tea, hoping he might bring it up first, but he didn't. Instead, he pushed off the counter and said, "I'm heading out for a bit. Let me know if you need anything." I nodded, watching as he left the moment. Felt like it should have been more significant than it was, and yet it passed as easily as a breeze. I told myself I was reading too much into things, that the tension I felt was one-sided, a product of my own restlessness. Mine. By evening, the house was quiet again. Jake was in his room, and I was in the living room, flipping aimlessly through channels on the TV. I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept drifting back to the way he'd looked at me last night, the softness in his gaze. I told myself it was just a moment of closeness. Nothing more, but the warmth that spread through me whenever I thought about it said otherwise. At some point, I gave up on pretending to watch TV and retreated to my bedroom. The air in the house felt heavier now, the kind of stillness that made every sound seem louder. I climbed into bed, pulling the blankets up around me, but sleep didn't come easily. I was on the edge of drifting off when I heard a soft knock at my door. My heart jumped, and for a moment I thought I'd imagined it. But then it came again, quieter this time, almost hesitant. "Come in," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The door opened slowly, and Jake stepped inside. He looked almost sheepish, his hands shoved into the pockets of his sweatpants. "I didn't mean to wake you," he said. I couldn't sleep. "That it's okay," I said, sitting up and turning on the lamp beside the bed. The soft light cast a warm glow across the room, illuminating his face. He looked tired, his eyes slightly shadowed, but there was something else there too, a kind of nervous energy that set my pulse racing. "Do you want to sit?" I asked, patting the edge of the bed. He hesitated for a moment before nodding and walking over. The mattress dipped slightly under his weight as he sat down, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I don't know what's wrong with me," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. "I just can't seem to shut my mind off. Do you want to talk about UT?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. The urge to comfort him, to make whatever was troubling him go away, was almost overwhelming. He gave a slow, deliberate shake of his head, as if the weight of the world rested upon his thoughts. "The matter at hand is far from straightforward. At times, the act of sharing one's thoughts can be a balm," I suggested gently. As I extended my hand to rest gently on his shoulder, the gesture was intended to convey comfort. Yet, the instant my fingers brushed against his skin, an unexpected surge of electricity coursed through my veins. I withdrew my hand with a suddenness that betrayed my anxiety, praying he remained oblivious to my fleeting touch. He cast a fleeting glance in my direction, his expression a veil of mystery. "You don't have to do that," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Kindly fulfill my request. Feign a sense of normalcy, as if the world remains unchanged." I parted my lips, ready to speak, yet silence enveloped me, leaving me voiceless. The atmosphere surrounding us crackled with an intensity that spoke of feelings left unvoiced, a weighty silence that enveloped our very beings. I yearned to declare his error, to assert that nothing had shifted in the fabric of our reality. Yet the truth caught in my throat, a silent testament to the weight of unspoken words. "I don't know what you mean," I finally replied, my voice trembling with uncertainty. He released a gentle chuckle, yet the sound bore no trace of mirth. "You do," he remarked. "I perceive the intensity of your gaze upon me." His declaration lingered in the atmosphere, a provocative dare that beckoned me to refute it. Yet I found myself unable to do so. He was undeniably correct. My eyes held a different light when they fell upon him, and that realization filled me with self-loathing. "Jake," I managed to utter, my voice quaking with uncertainty, "this isn't wrong." He interjected softly, "Don't label it as wrong, for it feels anything but to me." His words struck me with the force of a physical impact, leaving me momentarily gasping for air. I scanned his features, hoping to find a glimmer of jest, a hint that this was merely a cruel jest. Yet all I encountered was an unwavering sincerity. "I don't know what you're talking about," I murmured, my voice faltering and revealing the truth I wished to conceal. "Yes, you do," he said, his voice steady yet gentle. "You feel it too. I know you do." I yearned to contest his claims, to assert that his perceptions were mere fabrications of his mind. Yet the undeniable truth was etched upon my features, revealing all that I wished to conceal. There was an undeniable thrill that coursed through me in his presence, a fluttering of my heart that seemed to echo the unspoken thoughts that danced around him, refusing to fade away. It stretched on, far longer than it ever ought to have, a maddening spectacle indeed. I whispered, shaking my head. "You're my stepson," I said, and he replied, a small, sad smile playing at the corners of his lips. "And you're my stepmom, but that doesn't change the way I feel." His words sent a shiver down my spine, and I felt my resolve begin to crumble. I yearned to distance myself from him, to utter the words that would send him away and seal this chapter forever. Yet the truth held me captive. I was reluctant to let him slip from my grasp. So I remained there, ensnared in silence, the heaviness of his revelation bearing down on me. And in that stillness, the realization dawned that I had been deceiving myself all this time. This was not merely a transient infatuation, a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a profound connection, an undeniable force that tugged at my very being, and I found myself questioning whether I truly wished to resist it any further. My thoughts swirled chaotically, a tempest of ideas, each one slipping through my fingers like grains of sand, leaving behind only a sense of confusion. Jake's words reverberated in my mind, the gravity of his statement casting a long shadow over the space that lay between us. He averted his eyes, staring intently at the floor, as though the very act of meeting my gaze might unveil some hidden truth he was not ready to confront. "Jake," I started, my voice quivering with uncertainty. "This is rather complicated." His voice, a gentle yet resolute whisper, lingered in the air as he confessed. "I understand this isn't how it should be, but my feelings are beyond my control, and I suspect yours might be too." I longed to contest every word that fell from his lips, yet the undeniable truth loomed before me, unyielding and clear. The emotions I harbored for Jake were not mere fleeting uncertainties. They had been accumulating over the months, silently yet persistently, until they reached a crescendo that could no longer be overlooked. "I am your stepmother," I murmured, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "This isn't right." Jake finally lifted his gaze to meet mine, his eyes probing, searching for the truth within me. "Do you truly believe that?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. He inquired. His voice, soft yet unwavering, carries a sense of rightness that envelopes me, especially in your presence. His words danced through the air, sending a chill coursing down my spine, as I sensed my resolve beginning to wane. How could I possibly contend with him when my heart echoed the very sentiment he expressed? Yet the rational corners of my mind waged a relentless battle, striving to uphold their dominion, whispering cautions of the consequences that loomed and the perils that lay in wait. "This isn't fair to you," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "You're young, Jake. Your entire life stretches out before you. This sort of complication is unnecessary for you. And what do you, dear soul?" he inquired, drawing nearer. "Do you not? They, too, are worthy of joy." His words sliced through me, sharp and unforgiving, as tears threatened to spill from the corners of my eyes. I longed to declare his error, to assert that my happiness held no significance, yet the fervor in his eyes rendered deceit utterly unattainable. Uncertainty loomed over me, a heavy fog that clouded my thoughts and left me adrift in a sea of indecision. I admitted, my voice barely audible, "This isn't something I ever thought would happen." Jake reached out, then his hand brushing against mine. The contact was light and tentative, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. Instead, I let his fingers intertwine with mine, the warmth of his touch grounding me in a way I hadn't felt in years. "You don't have to decide anything right now," he said softly, "that I just needed you to know how I feel." I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I nodded, unable to find the words to respond. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but one thing was clear. I couldn't push him away. Not now, not after everything he'd just said. We sat there in silence for a long time, our hands still joined. The weight of the moment was almost suffocating, but at the same time it felt like a relief the truth was out and there was no going back. Finally, Jake broke the silence. "Do you want me to go?" he asked, his voice hesitant. I shook my head quickly, the thought of him leaving suddenly unbearable. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I don't want you to go." He nodded, his expression softening. "Okay." We sat there for what felt like hours, neither of us speaking. The tension between us was palpable, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was like we were both trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened, the unspoken promises lingering in the air. Eventually, I lay back against the pillows, pulling the blanket up around me. Jake hesitated for a moment before shifting closer, his movements slow and deliberate as if afraid to cross some invisible line. But when he lay down beside me, I felt a sense of calm wash over me, the kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. We didn't say anything else that night. There were no declarations, no decisions made, just the quiet understanding that something had shifted between us, something that couldn't be undone as I drifted off to sleep. Jake's presence beside me was a constant reminder of the line we had crossed, and though a part of me knew this was dangerous, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. For the first time in years, I felt alive, and that more than anything terrified me. It was as if something had been invoked in me that wanted me to do something with him, something exciting. As he lay beside me, I wanted to touch him, but I didn't. Not yet. The next morning I woke slowly, my mind still caught in the haze of the previous night. For a moment I thought it might have all been a dream, a fleeting fantasy my mind had conjured in the quiet hours of the night. But when I turned over and saw Jake lying beside me, his features relaxed in sleep, the reality of it all hit me. His arm was draped over the edge of the bed, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. He looked so peaceful, so at ease, and I couldn't help but let my gaze linger. My heart ached with a mix of emotions, guilt, confusion, and a warmth I couldn't quite name. As if sensing my eyes on him, Jake stirred, his lashes fluttering before his eyes opened for a brief moment. He looked disoriented, his gaze darting around the room before settling on me. When recognition dawned, a small, tentative smile spread across his lips. "Morning," he said, his voice still heavy with sleep. "Morning," I replied, my voice soft. The air between us felt fragile, as if one wrong word or action could shatter the delicate balance we'd found. Neither of us moved, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. I wanted to say something to address what had happened, but the words caught in my throat. What could I possibly say to make sense of it all? "Are you okay?" Jake asked, breaking the silence. His tone was gentle, his concern evident. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure it was true. "True, I think so. Are you?" He gave a small laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know, it feels different, but not bad." Different was an understatement. Everything about the world felt different now, like I was seeing it through a new lens. The boundaries I'd always thought were unbreakable suddenly felt blurred, and it was both thrilling and terrifying. "We should talk about this," I said, finally sitting up and pulling the blanket around me about what this means. Jake sat up, his expression serious. "I know this isn't easy for you," he said, "and I don't want to make things harder, but I meant what I said last night. I care about you more than I should maybe, and I think you feel the same." His honesty was both a comfort and a challenge. He made no attempt to soften the edges or disguise the complexity of the situation. Instead, he presented everything with stark honesty, unvarnished and direct, compelling me to face the emotions I had long evaded. "I do care about you," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But this is not just about us. Jake, there exists a vast expanse of thoughts yet to be explored." He claimed his gaze was unwavering. Yet isn't what we feel of equal importance? A question lingered in the air, elusive and unyielding, leaving me without a response. There was an undeniable pull towards him, a magnetic force that resonated deep within me, defying all logic and reason. Even as the voice of caution echoed in my thoughts, warning me of the perilous path ahead, my heart insisted that this connection was meant to be, inexplicable yet profoundly true. Fear gripped me, and before I could rein in my thoughts, the confession slipped from my lips, unbidden and raw. Fear gripped him, a tight knot in his stomach as he pondered the implications of this moment. With a hesitant resolve, Jake extended his hand, and in a heartbeat, his palm enveloped mine, a silent promise hanging in the air between us. "I'm scared too," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I'm willing to navigate this uncertainty if you are." His words lingered in the atmosphere, both a dare and a vow intertwined in their essence. As I gazed at our intertwined hands, his warmth flowed into my skin, anchoring me in a manner I yearned for with all my being. "I don't know if I can," I said at last, my voice quivering with uncertainty. "This matter transcends my own existence. It weaves through the very fabric of your father and our family as a whole. If this ever sees the light of day, and it won't," he declared with unwavering conviction, "I would never dream of causing you any pain. I find myself consumed by the fear of losing this, of losing us." The fervor in his voice stirred a deep ache within my heart. He held a conviction in this, in us, that I had never dared to entertain. The rational side of my mind was well aware of all the reasons this was a folly. Yet the other part of me, the one that had yearned for something beyond the ordinary for so long, found itself unable to turn him away. I can't quite grasp what this is, I admitted at last, or what it might become, but one thing is certain. I don't want to lose you. A faint smile danced upon his lips, and the palpable tension that had enveloped us began to dissipate, if only for a fleeting moment. It was not quite a resolution, not in the truest sense, yet it represented something, a cautious stride into the unknown, a venture into realms yet to be explored. The remainder of the morning slipped away in a tapestry of conversation, our words woven with care and precision as we endeavored to unravel the complexities of our predicament. It was peculiar how effortlessly honesty flowed between us, even regarding the fears that haunted me the deepest. He absorbed every word, his demeanor unwavering and comforting, a silent anchor in the storm of thoughts. As the sun ascended to its zenith, a peculiar tranquility enveloped me. The future remained shrouded in uncertainty, and the perils lingered like shadows at the edge of my mind. Yet, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a warmth enveloped me, and the weight of solitude began to lift. As Jake rose to depart, he lingered at the threshold, casting a glance back in my direction. "We'll find a way," he declared, his voice resonating with a steadfast resolve. Together, I nodded, a faint smile emerging to pierce through my veil of uncertainty. As he departed the room, a palpable void settled in, the space feeling stark and desolate in his absence. Yet, the warmth of his words remained, a lingering promise that danced on the edges of my consciousness, one I questioned my worthiness of, yet found impossible to release. In an unexpected moment, I discovered a newfound allure in him. What could have led to that moment, and how might I navigate the path ahead? Should I lean in and kiss him, or does my role as a stepmother hold me back from such a tender gesture? As the hours slipped by, I became increasingly unable to concentrate on anything but the echoes of our conversation, which played on a relentless loop in my mind. Jake's words lingered in my mind, a gentle melody promising that we would navigate this journey side by side. The burden rested upon her shoulders, a paradox of solace and enormity, teetering on the edge of aspiration and doubt. The house hummed with its familiar cadence, my husband moving with a purposeful energy, oblivious to the seismic shifts that had occurred. For him, life remained unchanged. Yet for me, the air was thick with uncertainty. Each fleeting look at Jake across the table, each unintentional touch of his hand, ignited a spark that felt both exhilarating and perilous. It had become a clandestine bond, an invisible thread weaving us together in a manner I had never dared to envision. As the evening wore on, I sought refuge in my room, craving the quiet embrace of solitude to sift through the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in my mind. As I gently shut the door, a long, trembling breath escaped my lips, filling the silence with a whisper of my unease. The day's burdens bore down heavily upon me, leaving me in a state of uncertainty, caught between the delicate threads of relief and the sharp pangs of apprehension that kept me on high alert. As I nestled beneath the covers, the world outside faded into a distant memory. The once familiar routine now felt like a stranger, each movement heavy with an unfamiliar tension, while my thoughts darted through a myriad of possibilities, racing like wild horses in my mind. Jake consumed my thoughts, his voice echoing in my mind, his touch lingering like a whisper on my skin, and the way he had gazed at me, filled with an earnest conviction that stirred something deep within me. The house lay in a serene hush, the vibrant pulse of daily existence gradually yielding to the tranquil embrace of the night. I extinguished the lamp, surrendering to the enveloping darkness, where the only companion was the gentle cadence of my breath. Yet, sleep remained a distant stranger, my thoughts clamoring for attention, too insistent to be silenced. As I teetered on the edge of slumber, a sound pierced the stillness, the gentle creak of the door as it swung open. My breath hitched, a shiver coursing through me as a well-known figure emerged in the doorway. Jake lingered at the threshold, his hand poised on the door frame, as though seeking an unspoken invitation to cross the boundary. I propped myself up, my heart racing within its confines, The atmosphere in the room crackled with tension, the space between us thick with all that remained unsaid. "Jake," I murmured, my voice quivering with uncertainty. "What are you doing?" "I couldn't sleep," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper as he stepped into the room, the soft click of the door closing behind him echoing in the stillness. "I found myself compelled, yearning to lay my eyes upon you once more." His words coursed through me like a chilling breeze, weaving together threads of fear and yearning that rendered me utterly breathless. For reasons I cannot quite grasp, it stirred something deeper within me. A whirlwind of excitement enveloped me, its origins shrouded in mystery, leaving me unable to articulate the reasons behind such fervor. He traversed the room with deliberate slowness, each step measured and cautious. Upon arriving at the bed's edge, he paused once more, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "May I take a seat?" he inquired, his voice a gentle whisper. "Indeed, yes, I implore you." And even more than that, the words slipped from my lips unbidden, before I could grasp the weight of what I had just uttered. He sank onto the bed, his proximity enveloping the room in an almost suffocating intimacy. The silence lingered in the air, heavy and tangible, until at last he broke it with his words. "Before we delve deeper, I must confess that your words have lingered in my mind," he started, his voice carrying a weight of contemplation. His gaze lingered on his hands, a silent testament to the weight of their shared reality. This was not merely a matter of us. It was a labyrinth of emotions, intricate and tangled. Yet, amidst the chaos, he could not deny the authenticity of his feelings, no matter how convoluted the path ahead might be. His candor was a gentle force, and I sensed my barriers dissolving beneath the gravity of his speech. I extended my hand, gently covering his, and he lifted his gaze to meet mine, his eyes probing, seeking something deeper within. "Jake, this isn't easy for me either," I murmured, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "All day long, I have wrestled with the tangled threads of my thoughts, seeking clarity in the chaos, yearning to uncover the path that feels just and true. Yet, as the sun begins to set, I find myself adrift, uncertain and lost in the depths of my own confusion. Uncertainty enveloped me, a fog of confusion swirling around the meaning of it all and the direction it might take. Yet, amidst that haze, one truth stood clear. My feelings for you ran deeper than I ever intended." And then, in a moment suspended in time, he met my gaze, his eyes holding a magnetic pull that rendered me utterly defenseless. It was a necessity, an unavoidable choice that loomed before me. I needed to seize my moment, to gather my thoughts, before he could utter a single word. I drew closer, pressing my lips gently against his. The kiss was gentle and tender, a fleeting moment that drew our lips together once more in an instant. He surrendered to me as well, and I found myself lost in a haze of confusion, unable to grasp the unfolding reality. The transition from tender kisses to a deeper connection unfolded swiftly, as if the universe conspired to draw us closer in that moment. I pivoted, and in that moment, he understood the unspoken cue, responding with an effortless grace that spoke volumes. The sensation was beyond words, a profound experience that left an indelible mark on my soul. It felt undeniably wrong, and yet, as thoughts of my husband flickered through my mind, an unsettling indifference washed over me. This was our moment, and I surrendered to its embrace, savoring each uncertainty loomed in the air, a heavy fog that obscured clarity and left one adrift in a sea of questions that slipped through my fingers. Truth be told, it stretched on for quite some time, longer than what one might expect from boys of his age, particularly when paired with a woman of my years. Yet, as they say, the longer it lasts, the sweeter it becomes. Wouldn't you agree? As he concluded, I reclined on my bed, a wave of understanding washing over me, grasping the weight of what had just transpired. I offered him a smile, and in that moment, his hand shifted beneath mine, his fingers weaving around my own in a tender embrace. We shall proceed with measured steps, savoring each moment as it unfolds. After a brief pause, he spoke, No PR presser with each deliberate step. The journey unfolds before me. Just us. The clarity of his words washed over me like a gentle tide, soothing the tightness in my chest, and I felt an involuntary nod escape my lips. Very well, I replied, one step at a time. For a fleeting moment, we lingered in silence, the stillness enveloping us, transforming what could have been a chasm into a profound connection of unspoken thoughts. Then, with a deliberate slowness, he leaned in, his forehead gently pressing against mine. "I can't bear the thought of losing this," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I cannot bear the thought of losing you. You need not worry. I have given my word," the assurance flowing from my lips with a surprising ease. "We shall find a way, as all things must unfold in time." The moment hung in the air, delicate as a whisper, teetering on the brink of something profound. I understood the precariousness of it all, how swiftly it could fracture. Yet for the time being, it was a treasure to grasp as we ventured into the unknown. As the night unfurled its dark tapestry, we lingered in that stillness, our words soft and deliberate, the bond between us growing richer with each fleeting second. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a spark of hope ignited within me, a whisper of possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, we could navigate this tumultuous journey side by side. Yet now, as I reflect upon it, those thoughts swirl once more in my mind. I don't know. Uncertainty lingers in my mind as I ponder the delicate task of revealing this to my husband. Should I even share it with him at all? If I happen to feel a twinge of regret, I would be eager to hear your thoughts on the matter in the comments below.